Yeah, and in addition to that, they have a very different orientation to time.
Yeah.
Day of the week, what? Who?
Appointments.
What time?
Not so big
that
on-
kind of stuff. So having that easy access is really crucial to meeting these kids where they are.
So here's one that we hear a lot in the neighborhood. A lot of folks walk down the street and they have homeless youth or homeless folks exhibit disrespectful or disruptive behavior. What should people do when they experience that? JR.
Well,
Please speak up.
I personally think people should just walk away. And I also think that if there was a drop-in center, there wouldn't be queer youth on the street saying that either. But like, if you're an adult and it's like a youth, I don't understand why is it so hard? What do they do? Like, no, I'm asking really, what do they do?
Right.
Like, I don't understand.
Totally.
why it's a problem.
Thoughts?
Well, I'm curious as to what's going on.
I mean, I definitely think that if youth were empowered and had services to access, yeah, they wouldn't be on the street and they wouldn't be angry that the community that they live in isn't neglecting them and not reaching out to them and helping them. And I think when youth feel like the community is taking a look at that and participating in a solution, that they feel much more empowered and can treat others with more respect. But I think it's very hard to do that when you're feeling neglected, which is something that most of these youth have felt their entire lives.
Do you mind repeating the question?
I'm sorry, the question was, what should folks do, residents do, when somebody on the street exhibits disrespectful or disruptive behavior?
I think also what's important to note about this question is that we're lumping queer youth and homeless youth into a generally homeless idea of homelessness and those who are homeless. Certainly a lot of the people around here are queer and homeless youth, and then there's also a large population of just homeless folks, whether they're straight, however they identify. And of course, a lot of these people have behavioral issues and mental health issues. Do I have a personal way of dealing with it? Yeah, give them respect, and if they are aggressive or verbal with you, just walk away. I know that sometimes that's really hard to deal with, especially when it's in your own neighborhood. I think that's why instead of incarcerating these individuals, calling the police, because that's what you normally do, there should be a 24-hour crisis line. What if the Coalition on Homelessness had a crisis line where you could respond to behaviors like this instead of having the police come out?
And there is mobile crisis, which is always inundated with phone calls, but they are supposed to come around and help people instead of the police access services. But sometimes they will say, we'll be there in 4 hours or something, which obviously you're not going to stay with the person.
And just to clarify about that, so that's for folks who are in psychiatric crises. So you can tell somebody is having an episode, maybe they're tearing off their clothes and running in the middle of the street, not during, a parade.
Yeah, it's
or
not a
something like
parade.
that, yeah. Something, or, obviously very agitated and screaming very loud at nobody who's there. This is folks who are experiencing a psychiatric crisis. It's a medical condition. And so we should be looking at it like that instead of, villainizing folks or, trying to group them in any particular category. It's something that many people experience. In fact, 1 in 8 people experience psychiatric problems throughout their life, and there's a lot of stigma around it, and there really shouldn't. It's a medical condition. So in this situation, you call mobile crises, which is the appropriate medical team to respond. And that's a much better way of doing it than the police. And we've had kind of a long history in San Francisco of trying to move away from the police response because people, they're trained to command and control, and when someone's in a psychiatric crisis, they're not responding to commands appropriately. And so what the police are trained to do is then increase their force. And so it's the same thing as if they were approaching somebody who was deaf and they were saying, put up your hands, and the deaf person wasn't putting up their hands, they were continuing doing whatever they're doing. Well, they're trained to increase the force. So the police aren't the best ones to call when someone's in psychiatric crises necessarily, although they do have a psychiatric liaison person. But there's no way that, the chances are, 1 out of 4 chances are that you're going to end up getting a regular police officer that is probably not trained appropriately to deal with someone in psychiatric crises. So call mobile crises unless there's a dangerous situation. I mean, if something's dangerous, and that's where you kind of have to deconstruct it a bit. Is someone trying to put their hands on you, doing some kind of physically assaultive behavior, that kind of stuff, then of course in those situations you want to call the police.
And if
Brenda?
it's not men-
Was that Lachlan?
And if
Brenda?
it's not mental health, you're always more than welcome to call and leave a voice message on my line, or send me an email so that my outreach team, if you're noticing a pattern of a certain time or day of the week that youth are out here, the outreach workers are talking to youth and finding out where they're at and when they're there. But it's always changing, especially with cop presence, during the winter down over on Market and Powell, and then the Haight, a lot of the youth are pushed elsewhere. So you can always contact the different service providers with outreach workers, and we can try and accommodate that too.
Brenda?
We only deal with we can 5150 somebody that's in a psych crisis.
5150 means?
It's a psych hold.
It's supposed to be a 72-hour hold. Generally not, but it
Right.
should be.
Okay.
But if somebody's in crisis, we're not like a team that goes out and responds to crises. That's if we're out there, or if there's somebody in particular that you're concerned about, you can always call one of the outreach workers lines. And
One question I have is, does each police precinct have a special outreach person? I know
yeah.
Park
Oh.
does.
yeah, they
For
do.
homeless,
Yeah,
yeah, not for psychiatric
Not
crises.
for
Yeah.
psychiatric.
No.
Not homeless, okay. So is that ever an option, what you'd recommend?
Well, I think they're better.
Yeah,
The homeless outreach police officers,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think if you
I'd
have
have
their
to
direct
disagree,
number,
sorry.
sometimes they're better. And it's really about building those relationships with them and educating them. Because if you
The
educate
police, right.
some of the police, they will respond and treat people better and with more respect. And that's definitely something that takes time. Like, I meet with the cops a lot, and it sometimes doesn't do much, but
So you know who's good and who's not so
Right.
good, okay.
Can I just add a little bit to that? We're talking about the more obvious kinds of disruptive behavior, the psychiatric episodes and all that kind of stuff, but, it really depends on what you all think of, spare changing and, just hanging out on the street and that kind of stuff, where there's clearly not an episode happening and so on. It's, a lot of, there's a real tendency for people to sort of just ignore, just move on, keep walking, no eye contact. It's actually to the detriment of the youth. Every interaction that they have, even if it's a really, really brief one, in which they feel invisible, we're just, it's just another reinforcement that these kids are not valuable, that they don't have any worth to us, and so on. So, as a preventative measure, to decrease the disrespect and the disruptive behavior, a little bit of acknowledgement goes a
Hello,
long
how's
way.
your day?
Hello, eye contact, just even a short smile. Doesn't mean you have to give them money or food or anything like that.
Anybody else? Okay. How about, let's move on to outreach in the Castro. What kind of outreach do we actually have? What kind do we have, and what kind do you think we need? How about Buck? Beck, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, from what I understand, there's the homeless outreach team. There is Larkin Street does regular outreach in the Castro. I do individual outreach in the Castro at times, intermittently, but I don't have a huge team. Otherwise, let's see. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Honestly, one of the biggest problems that I've encountered as a service provider is having easy access to these outreach workers and having them available when you need them, and having a full and comprehensive list of resources. Because, I talked to a cop last week about trying to get someone housing services, and they really knew pretty much nothing. And I have certain resource guides I can go through, but I feel like there's not everyone is on the same page, and so the picture is really unclear.
JR, what's your experience with outreach in the Castro? Have you encountered any?
When I first moved here, I wasn't I didn't see any outreach in the Castro. Recently, I've been seeing some because,
Okay.
I don't know, I think because it's more out there since I've worked with the programs, I see them more. But when I first got here, and before, the only program I knew about was Larkin, and I didn't see no outreach or anything, so obviously it needs to be a little better.
There needs to be more. Mike?